Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first of the webinars for the creative careers. I'm so excited to be here today speaking to these wonderful panelists about how they use creativity in their jobs and how they use their words and their writing to inspire others. And I think it's going to be a really interesting session. So the Creative Careers series is put on by First Story, which is a wonderful creative writing charity. They share stories and they platform voices of people like me every day in schools across the UK, and they are absolutely spectacular. So I've been part of First Story for 9 years, 8 years now, and they're a massive part of my life and a massive part of so many young people across the UK. And the purpose of these sessions is to get people to understand that there are places that creativity can take you. Creativity can be your future if that's what you want it to be. So we're running these sessions to let you know how to get into these jobs, give a little bit of insight into what jobs like this entail, kind of where the sector's going in the future, and give you a few tips and tricks on how to best move through your life and your career as a creative person. These sessions are incredibly funded by Arts Council England, and we are so grateful for the opportunity to put these on for people like you, because this is what First Story does. They want people like you to be platformed, and that's what we're going to do today. They're part of the Young Creatives programme, supporting the progression of opportunities for young writers from First Story. So this means that First Story doesn't just end after you finish that first year with your school. First Story is something you can be involved in for years. So today, we're going to hear from four incredible panelists about their roles and their jobs and their lives. And then we will open the floor to some Q&A, Q&A later on. So you guys will be able to ask questions, but I'll be asking questions for the start. Just a little reminder that you can put on automated captions if you go to the bottom of your screen. And that means that anything I or the panelists say will be just written out at the bottom of your screen in case you cannot hear anything. And there is a Q&A function in the panel, in the webinar, that you can use to ask any questions that you might want to ask our wonderful panelists. So, all of that out of the way, I'm going to introduce you to our four incredible panelists. So today we have Gabrielle, Will, Amy, and Anna joining us, and I'm super excited to be able to introduce them all to you. So, Gabrielle Heffernan is the Creative Engagement Director at the National Football Museum, which is a super cool place and super interesting, and not something you think of when you think of a typical museum. So, I'm super excited to speak to her today and get a little bit of information about all of that. Will Wren is the assistant librarian at the National Poetry Library, which is an incredible space for poets like me. They put on amazing events and have a massive archive of poetry, literature, and information, and it is so cool. We have Amy Kirby, who is a producer and works at the Museum Ethnographers Group, as well as Venture Arts and the Disabled People's Archives. So Amy wears many hats, but all of them are about sharing the stories of people across the UK and making sure voices are heard, which is super cool and something that First Story are equally as passionate about. And then we have Anna Bunny, who is the engagement manager at the wonderful Manchester Museum, which is an incredible space for creatives and for people interested in that kind of thing. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We are so appreciative of you guys being here today. So I just wanted to kick it off with a kind of general question. So we know that funding can be quite difficult in today's climate. This can be funding for the arts, funding for museums and libraries. It can be really challenging to get funding and to persuade people to that what you're doing is necessary. So why do you think it's important to continue to have museums and library spaces? Because so often we see in the media that people think these spaces are becoming redundant, and that's a horrible thing. So, I would like to pose that question first to Anna, if that's okay. Why do you think it's important to continue to have museums and libraries?
Um, hello everybody. Yeah, my name is Anna and my pronouns are she and her. And I work in Manchester Museum, which is part of the University of Manchester. And the importance and relevance is like the last couple of days in the museum. It's been half term, so we have been really, really busy. There have been families, children of all ages, people from all across Manchester and further, sort of coming and being together in a shared space, which is, and we're very fortunate it's free, but it's a shared space where people can hear other people's stories, see other things, but also just be themselves. And last night we hosted an event with amazing community organisations in Manchester to celebrate Lunar New Year. And it's a real thing about museums being a place of belonging and also giving, allowing different stories to be heard. So different Chinese diaspora communities were there, along with a great group of other people. So I think that there's that real role potential that museums have, um, and other arts organisations to celebrate different people, but also challenge things as well, and actually give voice to different people, and also challenge our own past. The museum has a complicated and contested history, but we're there sort of actually, it's a really important place where we face these things and bring people together or try and change things.
Thank you so much, Anna. I think that's really important that we reflect on the fact that actually these places, we may always associate them with older things, but actually they're moving with the times. That's really incredible. Thank you. I'll pass the same question over to Will, if that's okay.
Sure thing. Thanks. Hey everyone, I'm Will. I'm a librarian at the National Poetry Library. My pronouns are he, him. I would definitely echo everything that Anna has said. Libraries and museums are spaces for community and sort of gathering, are absolutely vital. And that is an absolutely key reason to sort of argue for their continued existence. And I suppose in a similar vein, libraries and museums are the sort of institutions that preserve our culture and preserve the stories that we tell. And I feel that if those stories are going to continue to be told and be remembered, libraries and museums are absolutely sort of vital in letting that happen and making that happen. So I feel like that is one of the sort of fundamental functions that we serve. And I would also say that in times where funding is quite tight, it's more important than ever for people to have free access to art and culture. I think gatekeeping that kind of access is, yeah, it's no good. It means that people sort of really lose out. So if we can keep this sort of free access available for people, it means that as a society, our sort of like souls get enriched and people can still have access to those things.
Absolutely. That is so important. Thank you, Will. Gabrielle, over to you.
Hello, so yes, I'm Gabrielle. I work at the National Football Museum, and my pronouns are she, her. Um, I mean, I'm not going to try not to just repeat everything that's been said because it's all great and I agree with all of it. I think what's quite interesting about the Football Museum is we're a museum, but nothing's older than about 170 years, which for a museum is really modern. And it really gives us an opportunity to think about today. We collected Unity the unicorn that all of the England football team were on in the pool a few years ago when they were playing. And then we use that to talk about racism and belonging and all these topics that people really feel. And it gives people something to hold on to or something to think about. On the flip side, I'm an archaeologist by training, and I've worked with geology collections and all stuff that's millions of years old. And it feels like, why is that relevant? Like, why do we need to have a load of rocks that have been here for, I don't know, millions of years? But I've worked on some really awesome projects. In my previous role at Tully House in Carlisle, we did this really amazing project, and it was all about geology and natural history, but it was linked to climate change. And we worked with a group of young people and thought about through random, old things, actually made them think about right now and thinking, this amazing creature that they're displaying, that's extinct. And there are reasons why that happened. And what are we doing today? And actually, people then left thinking about what's one action I could take right now to try and make the world a better place. So I think that kind of really amazing connection between the past and the present and getting people to think about the now, whether it's from something that's 3 years old or whether it's something that's 10 million years old. And I think museums, they are, and galleries and libraries, they're safe spaces. And there can be barriers to coming into them, and we know that, and that's something we need to work on. But we work really hard to try and be a space for everyone, and I think it's really important that we have those spaces.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That is so important. The combination of the old and the new and bringing them together to create reflections. That is such an interesting insight into that. So thank you. And finally, Amy.
Yeah, hi everyone. I feel like I've got the short straw a bit. What can I say to add something to what you've all said? Because I agree with it all. By way of introduction, hi everyone. My name is Amy. My pronouns are she, her. I work at the Disabled People's Archive, which is under the care of Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People, and I also work for Venture Arts, which is an arts charity working with learning disabled artists in Manchester as well. Um, yeah, museums, libraries, such vital, important spaces. I think beyond what everybody has just spoken about in terms of these spaces being powerful to bring people together and to think about community and belonging, I think there are 2 points that I wanted to pick up on, one of which um Gabrielle, you were just talking about with the idea of looking at things that maybe don't feel like they have a lot of relevance, but then actually it makes you think about things you can do right now. So, in my previous role at the Working Class Movement Library, I was coordinating a project called Big Flame, Inspiring Community Organising Then and Now. So we were looking at an archive of this group, Big Flame, who were politically active in the sort of 70s and 80s. So we're talking about 40, 50 years ago now. And they were very interested in organising the working classes to take control of their struggle and to empower themselves and to ultimately push for a better world. And we used this archive with 10, 11, 16 to 25-year-old working class people. Very similar to myself, actually. I'm only 26. So when the project was starting, I could have technically been part of it, which felt kind of weird, but also nice because it felt like I was really working alongside this group. Um, but all of that is to say that it was just incredible to witness in real time people engaging with material that, is like in reality about 50 years old, which in the grand scheme of museumy time is like not massive, but it still feels um like looking at this rich history of political organizing really makes people think about what they can do today in terms of pushing for the political movements that they want to see and to look at how they can change the world in ways that are accessible to them. Access is a massive part of my work as well, so that's really important for me when thinking about museum spaces. But I also just wanted to briefly pick up on that idea of museums being a safe space and being a space for as many people as possible, because I think that it is really important that people have access to museums as much as they can, to nurture their curiosity and to nurture their learning and to sort of be like a self-led learner and empower themselves to find things out for themselves. And more so beyond that, I think just that, especially when we're talking about in the landscape of funding and spaces that are facing budget cuts and facing like a lack of support, financial or otherwise, it is really important to have these, I guess you'd call them third spaces, to just kind of be. Like if there is a museum in your area or a library in your area, that's a free day out essentially. And whether you're there to learn or whether you're there to just go somewhere to find somewhere warm to hang out, all of those reasons are valid reasons for being in that space. So I think it's really important that people have access to spaces like that, to use them in the way that they see fit, whether that is what has been historically or institutionally intended by those spaces. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble.
No, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. And it is about that. It's not always about going to a museum that you have to look at all of the artifacts and you have to go and see. You can just be. You can just go and be. And that's something that I love to do, just to be in a different space. So thank you so much, everybody, for those answers to those questions. So, as you know, today we are here to talk about creative careers. So, the next question for you all is, how did you get into your roles? So, what was the kind of path of studying and education that you took, and how did you end up where you are today? So shall we start with Will, and then we'll go round?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Tilly. So I feel like I always wanted to be a librarian from a very young age. I remember going to my local library in Exmouth and not getting the job after being really nervous, and I just always harbored this like little dream. So I went to uni and studied something quite unrelated. It was like French and philosophy. But I feel like humanities set me up quite nicely to sort of get into library work. Then after uni, I worked for a few years as a bookseller. Um, at a bookshop, and while I enjoyed the work, I never quite felt like I wanted to be selling books to people. I wanted to be giving them away for free. So I always sort of harbored that dream. And then yeah, saw this sort of job come up at the Poetry Library as a in a library assistant role. Couldn't believe that the library existed. It's all modern and contemporary poetry. I still kind of pinch myself sometimes. Um, and applied and sort of found that in my application, sort of combining my sort of experience in customer service and kind of light admin really helped kind of in the interview and in the application. I think in libraries those are two things that if you're able to kind of push at the front of your experience, that they're really helpful because that is kind of what the nuts and bolts of the job can be. So that's how I started working in the library. While I was working here, I was lucky enough to be supported through an MA in Information and Library Studies. There's a variety of ways you can do this. I did mine in person at UCL, but there are lots of distance learning courses as well, if that is something that you're interested in. Um, and while I was doing it, a job opening came up to be a librarian at the library. So I sort of applied for that, and that's the role that I currently am doing and have been doing since 2019. So I've been at the library for 10 years now. I started as a library assistant in 2016, and it's really sort of sunk its claws in and has kept me here. But what's nice about the sector is that I think there's quite a lot of conversations around routes through librarianship that don't necessarily involve needing an MA and that kind of thing. I think experience is starting to become as valued as a kind of educational qualification, but it depends through libraries. I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time and get support when I needed it. But yeah, that's my sort of short journey to where I am now, I guess.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And it is always about support. I think support is so important, and that's why we wanted to put on these sessions to pose a little bit of support for you guys watching. So you have those resources. So shall we go to Anna next?
So I have probably quite a traditional route into the museum sector in one sense, and also I was when I was 16, I did my work experience in a local museum, but I I didn't then think, oh, I'm definitely going to work in museums. That's really what I want to do. But I was really lucky to have that opportunity. I did go to university. I was my parents were very supportive and were able to support me. So I know that I'm very privileged. And I studied geography, which was really enjoyed geography because it sort of brought lots of different well, sort of, human and people and nature together, which has been a strong sort of thing about my career all the way through, really. And when I left university, I got a job in a university archive, cataloguing papers of a 19th century artist. And the skills I needed for that was to be organised and sort of know how to use a pencil, which is a long time ago. But again, it was fascinating because you got to see into some people's lives. It was sort of about. You got this artist that his wife and 5 children all died of scarlet fever, so it was very sort of emotional, and that you realize the potential of that, emotion, stories, and people, empathy with people in the past. Sorry, I'm waffling a bit. Then I was really I went to work. I got a training scheme job at the Science Museum in London, which was a particular era. I was very fortunate. I worked at the Science Museum mainly in, I suppose I gravitated towards working with people. And so learning, education with people who aren't in schools, engagement. So it was always really what I really enjoyed was actually working with people. And so then I moved up to another museum in Manchester, Museum of Science and Industry, and then I was made redundant. So I had a wonderful opportunity actually to work at Salford Museum and Library, which is an amazing, not library, museum, on a project working with communities who are refugees and asylum seekers. And that was an amazing opportunity. And then I joined Manchester Museum, which is a part of the University of Manchester. And again, I've sort of carried on working engagement, sort of working with people and things. Again, the roots, I'm very conscious that I've come through a very traditional route, and the sector has changed. There are more different ways of coming in, and it needs to change even more. I'm going to be open there. But something the museum I work at now has done is we have quite a few resources on our website aimed at schools and also SEND groups, looking at all the different massive range of jobs that there actually are in museums. And so we've have career cards with so sort of mapping some of my fantastic colleagues' journeys into the sector, and they've come from a lot of different range of events, but all routes. But also it sort of shows you the sort of many different jobs that there are there in the museum sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Shall we hand over to Amy?
Yeah, thanks, Tilly. Yeah, so I think mine is an interesting one because I haven't ever done a sort of Monday to Friday 9 to 5. I've always been sort of part-time freelance, dotting about, being very restless. The way that I got into museums really is somewhat traditional as well. So I was always interested in history as a kid. My mum tells this really fun anecdote of me digging up her flower beds, looking for stuff in the garden, which then led me on to doing an archaeology degree at Durham, and that was incredible. It was really, really great, really interesting. I just became enamored with the idea of the use of archaeology for understanding the past and understanding the present, and how archaeology can be used in different ways for different motivations. So I did my dissertation on Mesopotamian museum collections and sort of languages of decolonization. So that was really interesting. And then I moved back home to Manchester in the pandemic because my final year of uni was disrupted by it. I did a master's in art gallery and museum studies with the University of Manchester, sort of from home, which was a really interesting experience. But it was actually really brilliant, even though it was all online. It was still, it's incredible the sense of community that I managed to get from my cohort and my peers and my lecturers, despite us not actually meeting in person. Um, but yeah, around that time, I also discovered Arts Emergency. So I got a mentor called Laura Crossley, who Gabrielle, you might know because she used to work at the Football Museum. Laura is incredible. She's so great. She's doing a lot of freelance stuff at the minute, doing sort of consultancy in terms of museums as workplaces and how to sort of make them quite sustainable and nice places to be. Um, but all of that is to say that Laura really helped me sort of fine tune thinking about what I wanted to do in museums. I think my first official museum role was at Stockport Art Gallery, which is weird because it's a Stockport War Memorial Art Gallery. So we had art spaces, but then we also had this really lovely war memorial that was very moving and just a really important piece of history to sort of have in the space as well. Um, After that, I worked with a few different arts charities. So one of them is Sheba Art, who do a lot of migrant-led work in Manchester. And through sort of darting across all these different places, I started to realise that actually what I'm most interested in is the intersection of heritage spaces, artistic methods, and social justice. So, a lot of what I've been doing over the past few years is finding fulfilling roles that look at how to use heritage material and artistic means to effectively tell stories and tell stories of resistance and change and protest, which is what I guess has led me to work with such a wonderful organisation as Venture Arts and the Disabled People's Archive. So I've kind of gone the other way in that I started in engagement and have been doing that for quite a while. But now I'm actually in my first sort of cataloguing role a few years in, which is really interesting because it's like I've done such front facing work that I'm now kind of going behind the scenes and looking at the other side of it. But yeah, it's all been really interesting and amazing stuff. Um, and yeah, I've also done a bit of writing here and there as well. So I do like journalistic writing. I am deputy editor of the Journal of Museum Ethnography. Um, so yeah, many different hats, but mainly because I'm just very restless and like doing lots of different things at any one time. Often to my detriment. So if there's a chance to talk about burnout later, maybe that would be good to touch on.
Thank you so much, Amy. And finally, Gabrielle.
Hello. So I think I can safely say that I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life when I left school. Absolutely no clue. I went to uni to read history and got a bit bored and decided to change subjects. So I changed to Egyptology for the specific reasons that I got to go to Egypt and learn to read hieroglyphs, and they both sounded awesome at about 19. So I very much followed what I enjoyed with, again, no clue what I was going to do at the end of it. I was just doing the degree because it was fun and I wanted to learn. Um, when I finished my degree, I went traveling for a while, so backpacked around various places. And then again, I'm not going to lie, there's a theme here. I had no idea what I wanted to do till I was probably very late 20s. So I did a master's in Egyptology whilst working part-time because I thought if I don't know what to do, I'll just carry on doing what I'm doing and hope that something comes up. Um, so I worked as a teaching assistant in a school to help pay for that, as well as also in an archive. Everyone seems to have worked in an archive at some point. And as a youth worker, I worked in a shop. So I had all these jobs to help me. Um, and at the end of my master's, I applied for a PhD studentship and I didn't get it. And that nearly broke me because I thought, what the hell do I do with my life? But I decided again, no idea what to do. I'm just going to carry on. So I started a PhD. I self-funded, lived with my mum, carried on with my youth work and my archive work and my shop work and all of that stuff to carry on while I did it. And I loved it. I loved learning about people's lives. And my whole PhD was about people. So it was, yeah, thousands of years ago, but it was essentially people. And while I was doing that, I started doing a bit of volunteering in sort of a local museum because everyone said to me, "Oh, you're studying Egyptology. You're either going to be a professor or a curator." That seemed to be what everyone thought I was going to do. And I thought, I don't want to be a professor, so I should probably try being a curator. So I did some volunteering and actually thought I could do this. This is fun. So I managed to get a traineeship. And at this point, to be clear, I was 29. I wasn't young. I got a traineeship to learn to be an Egyptology curator. I was really lucky. It was a national lottery funded. It was at the British Museum. It was awesome. I spent 18 months running around doing cool stuff there and in Glasgow where I was placed. Left that and started applying for jobs because I thought, well, this seems like a good career. I like it. I could try it. Applied for dozens and dozens and dozens of jobs, and eventually got a job as an assistant curator of archaeology, British archaeology, very little Egyptology, up in Hull. So I was born in Oxfordshire. I moved to London. I moved to Glasgow. I moved back to Oxfordshire. Then I was in Hull. And what I then worked out was I love collections. Museums for me are home. I love that stuff. Ancient stuff is amazing. I don't have the patience to be a curator because to be a curator you have to and a cataloger and some of you will know this, like it's a really detailed job and I don't have the attention span. What I love doing is thinking about the slightly bigger picture, thinking about those long-term strategies. I love dotting between 50 different things. So I applied for a job that was way, way out of my reach up in Carlisle, managing a load of curators at their museum. And by some miracle got it. So I moved again up to Carlisle, this time dragging a boyfriend with me. So it was, getting more dramatic. Um, and it was a risk because I might have hated it, but it turns out I loved it. And I stayed there for 5 years and I managed their curators. And then I moved on to a big capital development project. And I was like, this is amazing, but I kind of want to live in a slightly bigger city. I want to progress my career. Carlisle is very small. So I looked for jobs and the National Football Museum after a few months was recruiting for a director and it was director of content. So it was the collections, the exhibitions and the engagement. And I thought, well, I do the collections already. I've done plenty of galleries and I do engagement and I've been a youth worker and I've been a teaching assistant. Turns out those old jobs kind of handy. So I applied for it, I got it, and I moved to Manchester 3.5 years ago. Um, and that was my first really senior role in museums, and it's a lot of work. So yeah, I sort of learned as I went and built the team up, built everything we did, and eventually got to the point where I couldn't do the job anymore. It was too big, so we had to split, and I took the creative engagement side. So I get to do, as I say, the really fun stuff with people. And I remember back when I was interviewing at the British Museum, they said, "What's the role of a curator?" And I said, "Well, it's you've got collections and you've got people, and your job is to bridge the gap between the two." And even though I now don't deal with the curatorial side, that's exactly what I do in my job, and I oversee that, but from a strategic angle. So I think about, well, what are we doing now? What will we do in 3 years, in 5 years? How does that fit in with everything else? Which I love. And I get what you're saying, Amy. I also took on so many things. I was, applying for this, that, and the other to get experience, and you do. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, everybody. And we've just had a comment in the chat saying, I started college late at 45 and I'm pursuing library museum studies. Am I too old to get into this field? And I think my gut instinct and the shaking of heads would say absolutely not. Go for it. It does not matter how old you are. It does not matter what age you are, what experience you've got. If you want to do something, you should go for it. Absolutely. Does anybody want to add anything to that, or is that what you guys would say?
I could just add, not only is it not, it shouldn't be a barrier. There's so much that people bring into museums if they've had, whether it's a career before that or just life experience, like you're bringing in so much into the field. So I think it's a real benefit if you come in a bit later sometimes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So, we're talking about creative careers today. So, I just wanted to ask you all, how do you use creativity in your roles from day to day life? So, how do you bring in your creative experiences into the roles that you have, even if they're not necessarily creative labeled roles? So, shall we start with Amy this time?
Thanks, yeah. No, it's a really great question. I think that sometimes I'm being creative in the sort of traditional creative sense, in that sometimes I do facilitation, so sometimes I'll be planning workshops, and that requires me to use that part of my brain that is like, okay, what are the creative ways in which we can sort of get to know each other and hold a space together? And it will sometimes be very literally creative activities, whether it's like zine making or badge making or something like that. But generally, I think that, and I sense it might be a common theme in the panel, is that creativity impacts your thinking so much. Like, creative thinking is such a massive part of these kinds of jobs. Whether it's having a more creative approach to problem solving and sort of trying to think from a distance, okay, what's been working, what's not been working, what can we do next? Or whether it is thinking about how to adapt to something, or like just looking at things from a different angle. I think that creativity, it can be like the very literal, like artistic sort of creativity, but it can also be how you apply creative thinking to different elements of your roles for sure. So yeah, I think I like to think that I do like a variety of different creative things that sort of blend those two things together. Um, and I think I'm sort of at my happiest when I'm being creative and when I'm being collaborative with different people. So for me, the benefit of using creativity in the work that I do is that I get to sort of foster like inspiration in other people, and to see people come alive in like a workshop space, or when you're talking about archives, or when you're, so in my venture arts role, I am a coordinator replacement program. So I match up our artists with different organizations, museums, galleries, libraries, just generally organizations. And we craft sort of bespoke placements that tailor to the artist's interests, but also then make really great relationships with different organizations across Manchester. And I think even that can be quite creative, in that you get to really get to know an artist or somebody that you're working with, and you get to think about what progression looks like in the sense of their personal goals, their creative goals, their like more traditional sort of career based goals. And the beauty of that is that none of it really has to have a straight answer. I feel like I'm very much rambling now, so I might stop in a sec. But generally, just being able to think about things in like a multitude of different ways, and getting to know people, and the fact that everybody does think so differently, I think that's really the crux of what being creative in my job means to me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Amy. Will, shall we go to you next?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I can definitely relate to what Amy's just said. I think some of the most kind of creative feeling moments at work come from conversations we have. Often that's with someone at the desk, like a lot of library visitors. Those conversations, if they've got an inquiry and they're looking for a particular thing, involves quite a lot of lateral thinking. It becomes a bit of a collaboration between you and the person who's making the inquiry, and then that in itself feels like quite a creative process, which is really nice. And then also sort of conversations about collaborations on different projects or events and that kind of thing. They always feel like quite a creative space to occupy on a daily basis. I also do think at the Poetry Library in our role, there is a bit of kind of curation involved, which does feel quite creative as well. Like our remit is to collect every poetry book that's published in the UK, which is quite a broad remit. But then within that, when we're looking for kind of small press material or kind of more ephemeral things, we're building like an audio collection, which doesn't quite have the same ambition as collecting everything that's published. That's a really nice aspect of collections work, I think, is thinking about curation and the kind of creative side of it, and thinking about what people might be visiting the library to use, how they might want to use it, and what place it might have in the kind of overarching kind of story and history of the library. So I feel like, yeah, for me, conversations number one, that's what fires, I think, most of the team up at work creatively, and then sort of working on the collections themselves, which feeds directly into those conversations. That's another great kind of use of our creative energy, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Anna, shall we go to you next?
I'd really like to sort of echo what Amy and Will have said. I think conversations and talking with people is really where I, really value creativity, and sort of get my sort of energy from. I think one thing in my role is I think when I first started in museums, I said I want to work with schools, and I never actually have really worked with schools. But one thing that's really creative is I've worked with sort of almost everybody else, and it's actually when you bring people together who you don't know who's going to be in the room. I think and that's the same with school museum learning as well. So it's very creative. You need to be very creative to sort of like try to bring people together, but also listen and learn from others. And I describe a lot of my job at the moment as enabling others. And I do a lot of partnership work, with Venture Arts. We've done to name a few. And so I think for me, I get that creativity of sort of learning from all the partners and different organisations that we do. And yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. And finally, Gabrielle.
Yeah, this is a hard one because so much of what we do is creative, even if you don't always know it is, I guess. I think actually what Anna said about enabling creativity, particularly in my current role, a lot of what I do is troubleshooting and enabling. So it's jumping in and out of creative projects and sort of having a chat or helping to steer. But thinking about kind of what the wider team and sort of colleagues do, I think there's the really, really easy answers like, an exhibition, you're talking graphic design, 3D design, set design, creative writing, all those creative skills that go into creating an exhibition. And that's, not even thinking about coming up with a concept to start with and thinking about where you go. When we're talking about engagement, workshops, they are creative. You're creating something that's fun and engaging. At the Football Museum, our kind of theory of change is football plus creativity equals well-being. That's the kind of TLDR part of it. So everything we do is creative responses. But I think it sits even where you don't think it would. So over the last few months, we've been looking at our evaluation, which seems really dull because it's, did you like this? Tick this box. But we've had these amazing workshops where we're doing creative evaluations. So we've got currently in the museum, we've got a tombola that you can literally do, pull something out, ask your question, write the answer, pop it in a box. We've got spinning wheels. We've got like pictures that you fill in with words, and this is all evaluation. But we've done creative workshops with the team to come up with that. So I think you can bring creativity to almost anything. And I think, like Amy said, it's a way of thinking. And there's so many creative skills that we bring, but also just that general approach to our jobs that's this is meant to be fun and we're trying to engage people. And the more creative we are about that in everything we do, then yeah, the more success we're going to have.
Thank you so much. And I think that is a really important message. This is supposed to be fun. That is what you guys are doing, and that's what you want to bring to people, and that's brilliant. So I just want to remind everybody in the webinar that they can put any questions they might have in the Q&A or in the chat function. But our next question is going to be about bringing in diverse audiences into museum spaces. So how do you guys, in your roles, make sure that you're getting diverse audiences into your spaces? So should we start with Amy for this one?
Yeah, when I saw this question earlier, I was really thinking about it because I think it's such an important question, that often doesn't have a straight answer, and there isn't really a one size fits all approach to it. I think for me, the main thing I'd say is it really starts with language. So even like the idea of bringing audiences in, a lot of places that I've known or worked, well, not worked with directly or kind of worked in the remit of, um, kind of, how do I word it? like, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Just bear with me for a second. Um, there's this sort of implicit assumption that people are going to want to come to your museum or want to come to visit you. And there's the framing of, how do we get people in? How do we bring people in? How, do we make sure that we collaborate with people? And a lot of the time, what people miss from that is the standpoint of like meeting people where they're at, as opposed to going in with you being the museum and your audience being this amorphous like community that you need to engage with. um like really taking the time to understand and get to know the people in your local area and what they might want from your space, and maybe what they want from your space is to not engage with it. Obviously that's not the ideal, but putting the agency back into their hands and thinking about, okay, how do we invite audiences to be in this space in a way that is accessible to them, that is interesting to them, and that is relevant to them, is really the way in for me. And like I say, that looks different to different groups. And there isn't really a set way to do it. But I think that the more that you can try and demonstrate to people that you're interested in building that relationship and having trust with them as an audience group, as a community, and you sort of show them that there is something for them in your space, and that there is a sense of belonging there and a sense of community there, then that is the way to bring more people to your museum, to your library, I think. um I think it's a lot easier said than done, I will say. But yeah, I think it all starts with like the language that you use and recognizing like mechanics of power in those spaces, and how like collaborative projects can start to break down some of those power imbalances and redistribute it so that people feel like they're on more of a level playing field and feel more at ease coming into a museum space.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Will, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. No, I can, yeah. Uh, as is a running theme, I strongly agree pretty much with everything Amy has just said. Yeah, I totally agree that it's sort of about meeting people on their level, really. And it's something we've been thinking a lot about over the last year or last few years at the library. Obviously, we're the National Poetry Library, but we're based in Lambeth in London, near Waterloo. So we've been trying really hard lately to sort of do a bit more kind of outreach work in sort of communities in Lambeth and Southwark, just to raise awareness of the library. Again, it might be something that locals decide they don't want to engage with, but actually just sort of letting them know that it's a space that they can come to. We're based in the Royal Festival Hall, which already feels maybe like even the name of the venue is a bit of a barrier to some people who think it might not be for them or something like that. And we're really sort of making an effort to sort of go to kind of community events, have a little pop-up stall and talk to people about what we do, and then let them know it's free and open to everyone and see if they want to come. On a national scale, I'm just going to put this in the chat. Uh, there's a project we're working on called A Poet in Every Port. We're taking a mobile version of the Poetry Library to 11 different port towns across the UK over the summer. So that's a sort of way for us to really kind of spread the word about the National Poetry Library, but like nationally to a lot of diverse audiences. And of course, I think a really important thing is to sort of really make an effort to made the collections as representative of the communities that use the library as possible. So it's always just trying to make sure that a lot of kind of decolonization work is happening and thinking about collecting very broadly and really making sure that people can see themselves represented on the shelves. And our events program, we put that together by issuing an annual call out for event proposals. This is how we actually made contact with yourselves at First Story in the first place. And that means that we sort of give the stage to people who want to sort of use it and present their work. And it's a way for us to kind of connect with people who we might not have been having a conversation with before. So there's a few ways we really try and sort of make sure that we're letting as many voices as possible into the library. And it's a lot of fun.
Perfect. Thank you. Gabrielle, do you want to go next?
Hello, yes. So again, agree with everything. So I might repeat a bit. I think, I mean, this is so important. This is the crux of what we're doing. Like we are for everyone, and therefore we need to be for everyone. But I don't know a single heritage organization or library that isn't slightly struggling with this question because it is tough. Um, I think one thing that we all need sort of always need to recognize is that it takes time because this, we don't want to, there's that horrible thing where people put a project on, they engage with people, and then they just cut it off, and that does more damage than good. So for us, it's about building authentic and real relationships, and that takes a lot of time, and it takes organizational change. We've just getting towards the end of a 3-year project called Black in the Game. So it's about the experiences of people of Black heritage in football. And we have an exhibition on at the moment that closes next month. And it's all been co-curated with a steering group of people of Black heritage. But it's been, 3 years is it's still not long enough really to build relationships and actually create something that's lasting. And we're currently looking at, well, what's the legacy? How can we build representation into our board, into our volunteering, into our steering groups across the organization? Because I think the only way that our sort of content is truly representative is if our staff are, if our board are, if everyone is. And I think we all know if that typical, if you can't, you need to be able to see it to sort of to be it or to feel at home. And so creating a space that if you walk into a museum and you don't see yourself there, it's not a space for you. And it's very hard to do that properly and authentically if the people creating those spaces aren't representative either. So I think a big thing is that, and that's what we're really working on at the moment, and not making assumptions. I can't say why certain groups aren't engaging with the museum. The only way I'm going to find that out is to talk to those people and to understand. And I think it was Anna or Amy said, some people might not want to engage, and that's fine. Like, we'll let that happen. I completely agree, though, going out. If people aren't coming into the building, and we all know museum buildings or buildings can, in and of themselves, be a barrier, then we need to go out. We need to change it up. So we do outreach. We're going to be building more outreach in Manchester. We're going to be going out to schools. I've done assemblies in previous jobs. Get out to people because that's still engagement. That's them engaging with the museum. Yes, it would be great if they then come back, but if they don't, they've still had that experience with us, and I think that's really important. And really simple things like really questioning, is our marketing representative, or are we giving the impression that we're only for certain people? When we put stories out in our social media, all of those things that people can see, that's what gives them the impression of whether the museum is for them. And it's really hard to change that impression if we get it wrong. So it's trying to be really consistent and authentic about it. Um, yeah, and just keep working at it, I think, and just knowing that it is the right thing to keep doing. And sometimes you don't get the answer you want. And if you talk to people who aren't visitors, they might say things that are really hard to hear, but that's important.
Absolutely. And finally, Anna.
I'd echo everything that everyone said. So in Manchester Museum, we've just been through a massive a capital development program. So we were able to make some quite significant changes that have helped reflect the people of Manchester. One being our South Asian gallery that was co-curated with over 35 people of South Asian diaspora heritage, and we have members of staff who have so that's one great thing that we're doing. But echoing what Gabrielle and the others have said, we know we need to do more organisational change about who is working in the museum and in terms of the consistency. Also, we're facing up, I mentioned earlier that we are a project, we are an archaeology and Egyptology and natural history museum collection. We're a product of Empire, and we're really, taking decolonisation on its head. So looking at being open about that and sort of finding creative ways of doing that in the quite slow moving way that museums can work. But also, say another project is our Africa Lab that's just recently opened, that's looking at where objects in our collections come from, and the reality that often we don't know for lots of different reasons, often many racist reasons, that we've not recorded, or they've been taken illegally from local people. So we've been working with local community groups and saying, these are your objects, tell us about them, but in many sort of different ways. And another really important thing that we do is work in partnership with different organisations to actually sort of open up our spaces and share our spaces, which is why we work with First Story, to who have a base and office use of the museum. So that's really important for us to work with different organisations and partners to then help us. So we're supporting them in changing the world. And just very quickly, another example of that is Pink College, which is a fantastic organisation that work with young neurodiverse adults, offering an art and woodland experience, and they base themselves in heritage settings, and that's been truly transformational in sort of them being in the museum, being a safe space for them, their own creativity, but also helping us change the museum and who visits and who welcomes. So that's me.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, everybody. So, we are on to the final bit. So, for the end of this, I would love for each of you to share one top tip you have about building networks and interacting with others in your field. So, really quickly, we'll just go around the room and share those. So, Will, do you want to start?
Yeah, I feel like when I was getting interested in pursuing a librarianship qualification very professionally, one of the things that helped me was visiting as many libraries as I could, having chats with the staff, kind of trying to sort of in advance to get sort of a bit more info before I visited, and ideally kind of doing it with a group with other people who are interested. But obviously that can be quite challenging. But yeah, that would be my top tip, is to really sort of visit as many libraries as you can and get a sense of how they work, how they're laid out, all that kind of stuff, and the kind of day-to-day things that happen in each library.
Thank you, Will. Amy.
Yeah, I think mine would actually be quite similar to what I said for the last question, which is meet people where they're at. So when I've been to networking events, sometimes it can feel a bit stilted or it can feel a bit scary. And there are people that, you'll immediately go in, they'll be like, "Hi, who are you? Where do you work? What do you do?" And they want to like get straight to business because, that's why you're there to network. And I get that, but I am not that kind of person, and I don't really like to conduct myself in that way. I'm very much like a hiya, how's your day going? What have you been up to? Oh, I went to the cinema before. I saw this. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Like actually talking to people like people, and then you work in ways to talk about your job and talk about what you're interested in. But don't let that be the first thing that you say to someone. Like just go in and be nice and recognize that like we're all kind of in the same boat and we're there for the same thing, and it's just going to be a much more pleasant experience if you just try to come away from it with like a new friend, if anything. um it's obviously not always going to be like that, but yeah, that's what I try to do.
Thank you, Amy. Gabrielle, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm going to say use your socials if you've got them. 5 years ago, I would have said get on Twitter and chat to people, but Twitter's kind of dead. So I'm going to say LinkedIn is where it's at these days. Add people. I do not know a single museum heritage library person who would be offended at getting a message from someone saying, "Hi, I'm really interested in what you do." I find it easier to send messages to people rather than necessarily phone or walk up to people. So use that, join groups online and just talk to people because we're really friendly as a sector. So you'll probably get some nice things back.
Thank you so much. And last but absolutely not least, Anna.
I think I'd just echo what everyone else said, but really, really sort of be yourself and sort of like, so, we're all people, aren't we? So I think, what Amy was saying, if you are in sort of events or messaging people, just to sort of, ask questions and sort of be yourself. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you so much, everybody. And a massive thank you to all of our panelists for all of the questions that you've answered today and all of the insights you've given us. It has been truly incredible to speak to you all. So, there's just going to be a few links shared in the chat for you guys watching the panel. We've got our feedback form, our upcoming events, and the First Story Instagram in there already. If you could please fill out the feedback form so we know what you liked about today's event and what you would like to see more of in the future, that would be amazing. A massive thank you to Arts Council for funding this and for everybody who's worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure this panel can happen. It has been amazing to speak to you all. So thank you so very much. And I hope everybody watching has found some nugget of information that they're going to take with them into their futures. Thank you so much, everybody. And I will see you all hopefully in the next one.